The story begins in 2016. The Korean government had a program to repatriate fugitives, as many as 47 Korean prisoners who were in the Philippines. As the convoy exited the airport, one man spotted the man he was looking for. He yelled at the serial killer who killed his family. Then he angrily entered the barricade, where it turned out that this man was carrying a bomb by blowing himself up. This tragedy left 7 officers dead and 30 civilians injured. Time passed, September 2022, Manila, Philippines, in cargo ship port. That day was the repatriation of the prisoners, with the cargo ship leaving at 5 p.m. after the bomb incident that exploded at the airport 6 years ago. The Korean government doesn't want to take risks. They will use a cargo terminal that cannot be accessed by citizens to repatriate prisoners to Korea. The Korean National Police will cooperate with the Busan port authorities. The guards on duty are senior police officers with 10 years of experience in violent cases. The criminals who are repatriated are mostly Red Notice status, which is the highest-ranking criminal status issued by Interpol. The prisoner's car entered the cargo port. In the escort, one by one the prisoners got out of the bus, guarded by one policeman for one prisoner. Captain Lee Sok-woo is the commander of this escorting mission. He read out the names of the detainees one by one to get on the ship. Then, this creepy man got off the bus. He was Park Jong-do, a vicious criminal who escaped abroad, a serial killer and gang leader who was very feared in Korea. Captain Sok-woo remembers this bastard very well. He almost made his daughter a target. Jong-do's behavior made this captain remember all his rotten behavior and beat him to a pulp. A doctor named Kyung-ho and nurse Song-yeon-jae also joined the trip this time. After beating him up, the captain dragged Jong-do to the ship. The prisoners enter the ship. They will be placed 2 people per room, one by one handcuffed to an iron pole on the wall. While at the port of Busan, a group of people enter the Busan Port Control Tower building. The officers and employees were shocked by the arrival of these people. This person is the leader of the Prisoner Repatriation Command named Oh Dae-wong. He will take over all the work here with his team. Dae-wong tells all the employees to leave the premises. The control room manager doesn't take it and tries to refuse. A document shuts him up, and all the control room employees are kicked out of the room. Meanwhile, on the ship, the officers read out the charges and cases of the prisoners. Park Jong-do, a former teacher, is a serial killer, local gang leader, rapist of nearly 20 victims, then fled abroad. Next up was this calm-looking young man, Lee Dong-yeol. This young man killed an official in the Philippines and some random people in Korea. He was on Interpol's red list, classified as very dangerous, disappeared 2 years ago from Korea. Then there are 2 female prisoners among these 20 prisoners. The policewoman named Lee Dae-yin dragged these 2 prisoners to separate rooms. She handcuffs and reads the case of the woman named Choi Myeon-ju, who killed her husband and 2 parents-in-laws, then tried to escape when she was arrested. Captain Sok-woo entered the hallway where the prisoners were. He read out the rules of 2 meals a day, 1 bathroom a day, no toothbrush for safety, 3 days travel time. Sok-woo radio contacted the captain of the Frontier Titan. They had finished the arrangements. Sok-woo could leave now. Before leaving, Sok-woo reminds his men that always keep an eye from the criminals. Busan Port Control Tower, Dong-wook's men contacted the ship's captain to turn on the transmission once in 24 hours. They would make sure the ship stayed on track. Meanwhile, the nurses and doctors were placed in a special room. Dr. Ho was acting rather suspiciously. He took a syringe and several tubes of liquid medicine placed in a food bag. For safety, the police officers prepared all the food that would be delivered to the prisoners. Dr. Ho came to the pantry to get some food. There was a crew member named Kim Gyu-tae. This person was in charge of helping the officers prepare the food. The situation in the hull was safe. All officers were working normally. The Frontier Titan ship sped across the ocean. Dr. Ho looked around, entered the elevator, and went down to the hull, checking the ship's floor plan. Dr. Ho arrived at the granary, kept walking while checking the floor plan. Then he came to a room according to the plan. It turned out that there was a secret room, Food arrives for the prisoners, assisted by Ju Tae delivering food to each prisoner. Ju Tae sees that the officers are busy eating. Without noticing him, he opens a door secretly and pulls out the key. Meanwhile, in the secret room in the hall, a man is waiting below, and another man is busy watching his monitor. He was typing something on the computer screen, like he was programming something. This was what the police officers above and the prisoners didn't know. A body was lying stiffly on a metal bed. The body was full of IV wires connected to the body, full of life support. This body was codenamed Alpha. Elsewhere, a special mission carried out by Commander Dong-wook. In addition to repatriating the prisoners, he repatriated the results of a secret experiment smuggled in secret by a pharmaceutical company from Korea. Judging from the photos and documents as well as the text on the paper, the experiment may have been conducted decades ago. There were Japanese characters mixed in the pictures. Back to Dr. Ho, he looked at the body. The condition was horrible. The eyes had been stitched up, the mouth was full of worms. But strangely, the body was still breathing. The doctor was scared, but these people ordered him to do his job and leave this place. Dr. Ho prepared his tools, injecting liquid medicine in a bottle. Timidly, he did his job. In the control room of the port of Busan, his men reported to Commander Dong-wook that the ship had entered international seas. The freighter was making iron ore and cement, and there were no flammable items on board. While on the ship, it was almost midnight. The exhausted officers have gone to bed, and there are some who are still talking with their colleagues. Seeing the officers off guard, Jong-do started the action. He took something out of his mouth. It's an iron pin or clipper that can be used to open handcuffs. Ju Tae peeks at the police officers who are busy playing cards. Some of the other crew members join him, opening a room. It was the food warehouse. When the chest was opened, it full of pistols, ammunition, several guns, and dollar bills. A few days ago in the Philippines, these people wiped out the original crew, and these were the ones who disguised themselves and took their place. Jong-do's handcuffs come off. Jong-do tosses the iron pin to the prisoner next to him, casually pretending to put it back on. Ju Tae enters the detention hallway with his gang. The officers are astonished to see the crew, with one even carrying an AK-47 machine gun. Ju Tae greets the officers, and what happened next is a night of horrific carnage. 3 police officers are killed, and they are moved to the food warehouse. Ju Tae and his gang spread out, and they enter the wheelhouse. The captain and crew are still calm, and have the radio on, chatting away. Ju Tae enters and starts shooting the crew members one by one. There are 2 people they've left alive. They'll be piloting the ship. These men start cutting the wires of the connection sensor box and asking where the contact signal from Korea is coming from. This gang was very dangerous. Their weapons were well equipped. One man went upstairs, started cutting the signal receiver device. One of the members reported to Dong-wook the signal was cut, and the ship disappeared and undetected from the map. Dong-wook told him to do it with the backup system, only to find out that it was also disconnected. Now Dong-wook is furious and orders the International Ship Line Communications Department to reset the ship's signal from the satellite. Meanwhile on the ship, the woman Dae-yeon and her police partner Eunja try to contact their colleagues below. But no one answered. Meanwhile, some people are still on guard in the hallway of the detention room. The male prisoner who was with Jong-do makes a scene. The guard becomes suspicious when he checks that the handcuffs are off, and he's brutally ambushed by Jong-do. Simultaneously, Ju Tae and his troops enter the room. The second massacre begins. All the security guard there are slaughtered. It turns out that Ju Tae and his troops are the group of these 2 people, Janbae and Jong-do. These men salute the 2 men. Jong-do gives the order to release all the prisoners. Then he asks his men for knives and does horrible things to the surviving officers. When all the officers were slaughtered, the young man named Dong-il still calm, no change on his face. The communications department informed him that the ship was still in position. They suggested checking the situation inside the ship. Dong-wook had his men contact the meteorological agency in China and Japan to request the accurate location of the ship. While Dae-yeon is still busy contacting her friends downstairs, but still there is no answer. She is startled by Dr. Ho, who suddenly comes from downstairs. Captain Sakwu comes and tells her to stop threatening the doctor. They have a problem. All the officers in the detention hall can't be contacted. They accidentally see Jutei's men coming down to the wheelhouse after cutting the signal cable. The officers quickly chase upstairs. All of these cruel prisoners are free. Only Dongyil is still relaxed. One of the prisoners seems to have gone a bit overboard and has the fun of yelling where the policewoman is. He's going to find her. This makes Zhongdu take offense and shoots the man. Zhongdu seems to recognize Dongyil and greets him. He hasn't seen him in a very long time. Dongyil calls him stupid. He doesn't know what he's done. Zhongdu scolds him back. He should be grateful for being released. But the ferocious Zhongdu is a bit hesitant with Dongyil. The easily offended man doesn't touch Dongyil like there's something that scares him. Dongyil, who saw the dead officers as if looking at the past, there was a woman covered in blood in his house. It was his wife. Back to the present, Zhongdu immediately prepares to head upstairs. They will take over this ship. Most of them follow Zhongdu, except for an old man who follows Dongyil. While the officers heading to the wheelhouse see the scattered bodies, a fight ensues. The policeman who intends to shoot is riddled with bullets by Jutei. Then, a shootout ensues. When all his colleagues were killed, Jutei was left alone. Captain Sakwu tells him to surrender. Jutei yells they're the only ones left. All his men in the detention hallway must have been finished off by Zhongdu. Jutei surrenders to the crew and tells these men to surrender. The officers are forced to surrender. When Jutei is caught off guard, Dedian attacks him, and the officers finally finish the man off. The crew tells Dedian to go to the engine room to use the satellite phone, so the Korean authorities can send backup for help. Meanwhile, a terrified Dr. Ho is mocked by Unjet for being too cowardly. The doctor believes there are gunshots outside, and the prisoners are escaping. Yunji believes it's just her fear, everything is safe, but the real terror is just about to happen. All the corpses and dead body are collected and stacked in the food warehouse, but the criminals don't realize that the blood in the warehouse is flowing through the pipes into Alpha's sleeping body, and suddenly he wakes up. The two guards are busy on their computers, not knowing what the situation will be. Zhongdu and his entourage arrive at the engine room. The crew members are surprised to see these people and drive them away. But these people are very brutal, especially Zhongdu. The rest of the crew realize they're dealing with dangerous criminals. Zhongdu's objective is the satellite phone. He moves ahead of the police officers. Their goal is to destroy the communication device, so that help from Korea will never reach the ship. Captain Sakwu comes to the prisoner hallway. All that's left is a room full of blood. All the officers finally gathered, but the prisoners were missing, and also their colleagues on guard here had disappeared. The officers suspect this was planned by the prisoners before they boarded the ship. Dedian tells them there's a satellite phone in the engine room to contact the man in Korea. When everyone gathers in the engine room, only one crew member remains. He begs, without him, the ship will stop. But all these criminals laugh at him. Just as Zhongdu want to kill him, Dongyil stops him. At the same time, police officers arrive there and start shooting. Zhongdu orders his men to take care of the remaining officers, and they start grabbing weapons. The police officers and criminals yell at each other, only Dongyil just still calm, while observing the situation. Zhongdu starts attacking Captain Sakwu, and a brutal fight breaks out between the officers and the criminals. When these people were fighting, Alpha woke up and got there. This is the real terror of death. The officers and prisoners immediately stopped seeing how terrible this person was. Alpha's stitched eyes could actually feel the heat sensor. This guy was a walking murder weapon. The way of killing was so horrible. Bullets had no effect on Alpha. One of the prisoners even peeing in his own pants. The brutality committed by this monster is beyond reason. The prisoners immediately realized this wasn't an enemy they could fight. Then, all of them immediately fled from that place. Zhongdu, who was at the top, fired with bullets, but it was useless. All the resistance and efforts of these prisoners were in vain. Zhongdu, who was cruel and felt very brutal, met his opponent. This cruel criminal died in a shapeless condition. Captain Sok-woo looked around. There were corpses everywhere. He tried to find his surviving members. Suddenly, Alpha returned, and at that critical moment, Dongil helped him. Surprisingly, Alpha can dodged Dongil's stab. He felt it was dangerous. Dae-yeon takes her captain upstairs, while Dongil tried to hold Alpha. Alpha's body immediately regenerates after being shot. It turns out Dongil can fight Alpha. Then Dongil also managed to close the iron door that locked the Alpha in the room. There were some people who survived and went upstairs. Daewon's members reported that they finally got the ship's position. They were at sea near Taiwan. When the satellite image of the ship was zoomed in, there were many bloodstains in the upper area of the ship. This man was furious, the officers really useless. The police officers had failed to guard the prisoners, and it started to unravel a bit. Dong-wook, who the government officer, this is the one who smuggled the Alpha in the barn. And this guy who was talking to him was Pyo. These two blame each other. Alpha shouldn't have been on the same ship as the prisoners, but Dong-wook was the one who suggested that condition. Now everything's a mess. Director Pyo wants him to bring his team and pick up Alpha. Then Pyo hangs up, and that makes Dong-wook very angry. The situation in the women's detention room has been turned upside down. The policewoman has been arrested and handcuffed. Some of the prisoners upstairs don't know that all their side have been eliminated downstairs and are still casually laughing. The two surviving crew members want to escape the ship when they want to grab a life preserver and lower the lifeboat. That's when Alpha appeared and started the massacre again. Dr. Ho and Eunji's nurse in the room hear a strange noise, and suddenly, Alpha kills Eunji. Dr. Ho runs in fear and meets up with the survivors. Dae-yeon and Captain Sok-woo ask questions and force the doctor to tell them what really happened. Dr. Ho replied he was only paid by someone to inject some kind of anesthetic every 6 hours into the secret monster-like death body in the ship's barn. There was a secret pharmaceutical company that offered him a lot of money. Dr. Ho says there's a drug in the basement that might make the monster sleep. Dae-yeon will check in the basement. Captain Sok-woo will look for their colleagues who might still be alive. The two of them checked the banged-up door. The monster was already here and started its massacre. These men were terrified to see Alpha's form was so horrifying. Other than these two people who escaped, everyone died in horrible conditions. Captain Sok-woo arrived near the female prisoner's room. His colleague and several prisoners were also dead. Meanwhile, Dr. Ho and the others reached the basement, trying to find the anesthetic. The two guards were also dead. Dae-yeon is surprised to see Dongil injured, but he doesn't seem to be in pain and is normal. Only then is it revealed who Alpha really is. Dae-yeon also found a secret Japanese document with Alpha's photo on it. The person's name was Kim Han-kyu, born in 1911. In 1943, this person was a Korean soldier who resisted Japan, caught and imprisoned on the west side of Mindanao Island in the Philippines. The subject, codenamed Alpha, was a human weapon tested by the Japanese. Only then did these people realize the creature they were fighting was too terrible. Dr. Ho obtained information from the surviving laptop. Research subject Alpha has a tendency to commit indiscriminate violence, loses consciousness, and is very sensitive to the smell of blood. He reacts very quickly to sudden movements, developed from the genetic code of wolves. The cell discovery factor doesn't apply to the subject. He can live far longer than an ordinary human. Back to 1943, when Alpha was made in secret by the Japanese. At first, everyone in the secret lab was happy. The first subject, after hundreds of failed research objects, they finally succeeded. They all clapped their hands with joy. But unexpectedly, the side effects of noise and movement affected Alpha. He woke up and started slaughtering everyone in the lab. Meanwhile, the pair who escaped couldn't escape Alpha's chase. Junbei was brutally killed, while Myongju was saved by Captain Sok-woo, who happened to be passing by. The elevator falls violently towards the basement and startles the people. While Dong-wook and his troops, especially using helicopters, headed for the location of the Frontier Titan ship in the middle of the ocean. The pharmaceutical company was called EN Genetics. All soldiers injected drugs into their bodies. Captain Sok-woo hides in the food warehouse with Ma Yeon-ju. He accidentally found the bodies of his colleagues piled up in the warehouse and told Ma Yeon-ju not to get out of there. Alpha shows up and beats Captain Sok-woo up badly. Captain Sok-woo fights back and breaks Alpha's hand, but his fate ends tragically. Ma Yeon-ju pretended to be a corpse due to the cold temperature. Alpha thought she was dead and left. Alpha heard the sound of a helicopter and immediately moved. All the troops went down, and the survivors also heard the sound of the helicopter. They thought they were going to be picked up, so they moved up. Dong-wook and the rest of the troops checked, and it was Ma Yeon-ju who came down. She told Commander Dong-wook about the terrible situation. The monster killed everyone, but she was also killed by Dong-wook. Dr. Ho and the old man arrive. Dae-yeon sees these people are armed, thinks they're criminals, pulls out her gun, and threatens. Unfortunately, Dae-yeon ends up dead too. Dong-il arrives late, then seeing Dae-yeon also killed. Just as Dong-wook and his troops want to kill these three, Dong-il makes his move. It turns out Dong-il is also a human experimented on by Aeon Genetic. He fought Dong-wook, tearing his shirt. This person is a failed project from Aeon Genetics. It turns out that Dong-il deliberately killed in the Philippines, so he could get on the ship to find the Aeon Genetics company in Korea. Finally, Dong-wook remembered about this person. Dong-il was originally an ordinary warehouse employee who didn't know he was working in Aeon Genetics' secret warehouse. One of the subjects there went berserk and started killing people. That's when Dong-wook and his army came to clean up the mess. Since Dong-il was still alive, he was caught and combined with the other research subjects. Not all subjects could pass the trials. Almost 90% of the subjects failed and died, including Dong-il, who was thought to be dead. All the bodies of the subjects who failed and died were disposed of and destroyed. That's when Dong-il realized and escaped from that place. Dong-il returned to his home and began to be haunted by nightmares every night. But Dong-wook and his army realized that Dong-il was still alive and searched for him. They killed his wife and son, making Dong-il very angry. Dong-wook reminds him of his bad times, and a fight ensues. That's when Alpha arrives and intervenes. Dong-wook ordered to finish Alpha and take his head. Dong-il began killing Dong-wook's men one by one. Alpha was still too strong for Dong-wook's men, but he met his match. Commander Dong-wook, also a more perfect research result than Alpha. His men were also defeated by Dong-il. Dr. Ho and the old man were also killed while trying to force the helicopter pilot to leave. On the other hand, Alpha was defeated by Commander Dong-wook. Only Dong-il and Commander Dong-wook still survive. Another brutal battle ensued. Dong-il, who was reminded of Dong-wook killing his son, made this man go berserk. Dong-wook fell off the boat after being stabbed by Dong-il. Dong-il chased after him and jumped into the sea. Next to Mindanao, Philippines. This is the secret facility of Aeon Genetics. Director Pio wants to move the entire facility to Korea, but the people there say the cost would be huge. All the subjects there are very aggressive and dangerous, but Director Pio is still going to move everything. A door opened. There was a teenage boy trapped in there, and this teenage boy was Dong-il's son. A genetically formed subject from his father, not from a serum injection. As it turns out, Dong-wook didn't kill this baby when his eyes naturally changed. And a shocking secret, Director Pio is the same generation as Alpha. This man has lived more than 100 years. In a part of the far sea of Korea, a figure came out of the sea. This man turned out to be Dong-il. He will continue his revenge mission to the people who made his entire family destroyed. Then the movie ended.